Hello, everybody. How are you? Continuing our series on Jacksonville, the great city in the great state of Florida. And this one's going to talk a little bit about a physical phenomena that a lot of people are asking me about, and that's the barrier reefs. Now, on the oceans, on the outside the beaches of Jacksonville, just off of the city beaches, the nearby beaches, if you look out over the water, out over the Atlantic, you'll see the barrier reefs. And people are asking me, what is it all about? Why are there barrier reefs in the waters, ocean waters off of Jacksonville? And it's kind of a long story, guys, but we're going to get into it. So there was originally sandbanks out there. They weren't necessarily barrier reefs at that time. So again, we're talking in the early days of the European settlement of Jacksonville. 1500s, 1600s, 1700s. And Jacksonville originally had a resort appeal to people from the Northeast. Because remember, the northeastern United States developed much quicker into an urban centers, than did the Florida and Georgia states and the southeast. So what do you do when you're in New York City, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Providence, and all of New Jersey, the dirty Jers? When you want to go on vacation, when you want to get some rest, when you want some respite from urban life, well, where are you going to go? And the answer is Florida. And so early on, there was a huge interest in Jacksonville from cities in the Northeast, specifically New York City. Of course, with the most people, that makes the most sense. And Jacksonville, one of the appeals it had is it wasn't quite as far south as, let's say, the Keys or Miami or Lauderdale. You could leave the Northeast, drive down to Jacksonville, or just hop on a flight, whatever, and be back home in a little bit quicker time than it would take to go all the way down to the southern part of Florida. So, of course, the influx really shifted the balance of the lifestyle in Jacksonville as the beginning of the 1900s began. Right through 1930, 1940, you started to see a huge influx, actually 1920s through the 40s, of Northeasterners coming to Jacksonville. Now, all communities like people to come to their city and spend money and show interest about moving there, perhaps when they retire, or perhaps as a vacation home, or just full time. But what happened was all of these people from Jersey, Baltimore, Providence, even as far north as Boston, when they came down to Jacksonville, the volume level of the city of Jacksonville went up considerably. Because remember, Jacksonville really, at the end of the day, is part of the Old South. And the speech patterns of people from old southern towns is much different than a nor'easter coming down. So not only was the typical Florida speech pattern quieter and more laid back, it was slower, right? And then you had these loud Northeasterners coming down for vacation or however long they stayed, which was fine, but it was getting excessive. The way they talked so fast and so loud and with such demands that it really started to alarm the city fathers, because wait a minute, now we have a situation where the noise is getting excessive and our city isn't really set up for that. So they began to restrict the number of people that could come down from the Northeast. And there wasn't any specific rule. They just said, listen, if you're from the Northeast, and that's how they left it, that vague, and you have have the natural speech patterns of a Northeasterner, please lower the volume and speak slower. That's all they asked. And it didn't work. So then they tried limiting the number of people from those states and the cities that could come to Jacksonville at any one time, because Jacksonville was so popular within those cities and states that the actual volume level started to get so loud you could barely hear yourself. They were landing planes at Jacksonville International and nobody knew. You couldn't tell there was even a plane being landed because of the loud voices of all these people from New York and Boston and Philly and Washington, D.C. and Jersey, especially Jersey. And so then they tried to outright limit the number of people. They would take applications they would take reservations for the city. Essentially, you had to have a reservation to go to the city for vacation or for whatever purpose. You had to have a reservation. And that still didn't work, because when any kind of business that is looking at potential visitors, tourist dollars, they're not going to honor the reservation system. So then the city started calling in the National Guard. And they asked the governor of Florida, can you help us at least limit the number of people from the Northeast that are coming down here, because they talk so fast and loud. First of all, we can't understand them. We never get their orders right. We don't know if they wanted one room or two. Do they have their whole family coming down? We can't get the details right of their vacation, of their respite from that Northeast lifestyle. We get it. They want a break, but hey, we need a break from them. And guys, this started in like the 1910s, 1920s. And by the late 30s, early 40s, I mean, it got to the point where the city started outright limiting completely the number of Northeasterners. And so then well, here's what happened. Well, what do you do when you can't get into Jacksonville via land or by air? I mean, a lot of these Northeasterners, they lived right on the coast in the Northeast, right on the ocean. What do? They got in their sailboats. They got in their power boats. They got in any kind of boat or ship necessary, and they went into Jacksonville by sea. They went into Jacksonville via the ocean. I mean, these are people from Boston and Philadelphia that built those cities into worldwide megalopolises. They're not going to be deterred by a little rule from the city fathers of Jacksonville. Okay? And they took to the water, guys. They took to the water, and that's where the sandbars come into play. The city then said, all right, we're going to bar the waters, and they built those sandbars into Great Barrier Reefs. Great Barrier Reefs, and set up guard shacks all along. You couldn't get in or out without approval from the city Coast Guard, guys. City police boats, Florida Coast Guard, all kinds of seafaring patrols, day and night, were plying those waters to keep out the New Yorkers, to keep out the Bostoners. Even the Mainers were coming down. Maine! You hear what I'm saying? Maine people were coming down to enjoy the relaxation, the golf courses, the tennis courts, the beaches, the beautiful people, the cheap drinks and good food of Jacksonville, Florida. That's what was happening. And now you had patrol boats pulling over these boats from New York. Now you say, well, how did they know? How did they know they were coming in from New York or whatever? Guys, they're loud as heck. You can tell right away a boat is coming in from Boston. You can tell right away a boat is coming in from Philadelphia, from New Jersey, from gosh darn Providence even. Because the people spoke so loudly, it pierced the night air. And so the local authorities, the police boats, the Coast Guard, all kinds of, they even employed local citizens to patrol the boats and their fishing and their rowboats and their canoes, doing everything to try to limit the number of these Northeasterners coming down, trying to access the good town of Jacksonville. And so, of course, a confrontation was going to come to a head, right? You can't carry on like that as a city. And ultimately, a tragedy happened where a police boat was trying to arrest a party boat from Baltimore, and the Baltimore citizens revolted, and they all dove in the water and swam to shore, avoiding arrest, and thereby starting a controversy. Maybe you saw it in the papers at the time if you're an older citizen, but if you Google it, you'll find the story. Baltimore citizens jump ship and swim for shore to avoid arrest by local authorities in Jacksonville. And it was in the middle of the night, guys, and this was after partying the whole way down from Baltimore, so they were liquored up, which probably gave them the courage to jump in the icy waters off of Jacksonville. So that's where the barrier reefs come into play. Now today, of course, they play a completely different role. And they play the role of welcoming people to the city. In fact, there's big banners up on the barrier reefs now that say, "Welcome to Jacksonville. Please reduce speed entering Jacksonville waters." Welcome, right? And a lot of times they'll have marching bands out there, they'll have cheerleaders, and certain holidays they'll dress up, like on March 17th is coming up. They're going to dress up in Irish hats. They're going to wear Irish green clothing, and it's going to be a whole thing. So, guys, that's really what's going on with the barrier reefs. I hope that answers the question, because it's a fascinating story. And again, this is what I say. I knew of Jacksonville, but I didn't know all of this deep history that is so cool. All of these stories handed down through the generations and are now coming to light with vloggers and travel journalists such as myself. So, wow, I hope you enjoyed that. If you know anything more about this story, hey, leave a comment on the YouTuber, on the Twitter machine. And if you know any other great Jacksonville stories that I should follow up on, leave me a comment. Man, I'll jump right on it. We'll get it going, and we're going to have a whole host of different stories about Jacksonville. And of course, it's part of the fabric that makes the city so wonderful. Come on back, guys. We got a lot more.